everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Claire. This is The Wanderlust Way. So in today's video, we are back at London looking at some more tourist attractions. These ones are paid for, but a lot of them are very, very reasonable. And some of these attractions are a little bit off the beaten track. They're not what you would usually find, say, on TripAdvisor for the top attractions. So I'm going to share with you all, and I'm going to share with you a tube station that you're going to need, and I'll also share with you whether I think it's good for families, couples, single people, groups, whatever. So hopefully this is going to help you plan your next trip to London. And if you haven't watched my other video, which is all the free attractions, skip to last week and you'll see that, but you don't need to have seen that to watch this. Anyway, enough waffle. Let's wander back to London. Number 10, join a walking tour. London is now, of course, a very 21st century city. The capital of England and the United Kingdom, it's one of the largest and most important in the world, with over 20 million international visitors coming in 2023 alone. With an extensive history and an array of iconic landmarks, it's no wonder the tourists flock here in their masses. But if it's your first time to the city, then all of this can be a little daunting, and so I always think settling yourself in with one of the city's guided tours is a great place to start. Yes, they have the open-top buses, but in my experience the best way to really explore London is by hitting the streets, roaming the parts, and looking up at the fantastic details that often tell a story. There are some incredible walking tours available, most of which can be booked in advance online before you arrive, and there really is something for everyone. If you're coming with children, for example, you may enjoy the Paddington Bear or the Harry Potter tour. If it's music you're into, then there's a tour of the Beatles. Or if you're in a group and you like a good pint, then I've heard there's even a historic pub tour. There's of course an abundance of historical tours too, just take your pick at your favourite. On our last visit, we joined a ghost walk, which also incorporated a cruise along the River Thames. More coming on that soon, but my most favourite tour so far in all of London has to be the Jack the Ripper walk. I'm told this ghastly trail is one of the most popular in all of London, taking you through the streets of Whitechapel and past some of the important sites in the case. It's not for everyone, but for me, the guide was exceptional, and I would certainly give it a 10 out of 10. There are a few companies offering a Jack the Ripper tour, but if you'd like the link to the one we attended, which I can guarantee is brilliant, then feel free to drop me a message in the comments. And if the tour leaves you feeling even more intrigued about these horrific murders from 1888, then my next suggestion should follow on nicely. Number 9, the Jack the Ripper Museum. Why do you think the Jack the Ripper case still gains so much interest? Let me know in the comments. Housed in a historic Victorian house in the heart of Whitechapel, the Jack the Ripper Museum tells the full story of a series of murders which took place in the year 1888 across the East End of London. The killings have of course been of international interest since they began, with hundreds of theories emerging, each trying to solve the crime, but to this day the case remains a mystery. The museum takes you back to the year 1888, where you will become immersed in a London that is dark, depressing and ultimately dangerous. Despite a cheerful greeting from the staff member on reception, you can be sure as you approach the stairwell that this is no Disneyland. Newspaper reports of the crimes are splattered across the walls, and as you approach the first room, the faint sound of a policeman's whistle can be heard in the distance. All the rooms are of course reenactments of vital points in the case taken from the evidence available. Starting with the dimly lit Mitre Square in which the body of Catherine Eddowes has just been discovered, to a reconstruction of how the killer's sitting room may have looked. From there you'll visit the police station and get to view real-life artefacts that have been collected by ripperologists over the years. These include the desk of the detective in charge of the case, and the notebook, handcuffs and truncheon carried by the police constable who discovered one of the victims. Finally, you can see an example of the living standards of the victims at that time and read more on their own personal stories. If you're brave enough before leaving, there's also an opportunity to visit the mortuary and see original autopsy photos. Although I'd ask yourself whether you really want to see that before you enter, and do what your heart tells you. I'm going to be honest, after visiting here I felt incredibly sad and far more sickened than I did after the Ripper Walk, but I'm a fan of history and I can't just pick and choose the nice bits. The story of the Ripper gives a broader insight into the conditions of London at that time and how the city's poverty had a lot to answer for. If you're into the history or the Jack the Ripper story captures you, then it's worth a visit, but not unless you've got a strong stomach, and I'd personally not bring children here. The nearest tube station was Tower Hill, and the museum can be found on Cable Street. Number 8. Ride the Underground. Most visitors coming to London will find using the Underground, or the Tube as it's more commonly known, to be the easiest and fastest way to get around. But for me, the Underground in itself is an attraction. Opened in 1863 when the world's first underground railway between Paddington and Farringdon began, it now handles up to 5 million passenger journeys a day, and at peak times there are more than 543 trains whizzing around the capital. During the course of the war, it is estimated around 63 million people took shelter in London's tube stations. With the city suffering major air raids and intensive bombing during the Blitz, these deep-level tube stations offered basic safety beneath the streets. Underground offices were also formed for government staff, and Down Street Station was installed with phone lines, even hosting a meeting of the War Cabinet. Today the network includes 272 functioning tube stations, but at least another 40 overground and underground stations are now disused. If you want to go deeper, there are tours available allowing you to be taken behind closed doors in order to explore the disused tunnels, platforms and ticket offices. I haven't personally had a chance to do one of these yet, but it is on the bucket list. Number 7. The Clink Prison Museum. The Clink was established in 1144, making it one of the earliest prisons in England. The first of 6 in Southwark, it was owned and controlled by the Bishop of Winchester as his private jail. Southwark housed a multitude of sinners, with gambling, drinking and scandalous behaviour in abundance. Petty crime was rife and criminals faced stern correction. The actual prison itself was destroyed during the Gordon riots of 1780, when rioters broke into the Clink, released the prisoners and burnt the building to the ground. Today the museum stands on a site as close as possible to this location, and when you step inside you can see a part of the original prison wall. Again, another part of dark history that many of us would like to forget, the museum showcases examples of prisoners who would have spent time here, including heretics, debtors, prostitutes, and even some of the Pilgrim Fathers. It's only a small museum and will take up to an hour to walk round, but it's an interesting, if somewhat grisly reminder of how prison used to be. Get up close with some of the torture devices used and see how squalid, dark and dingy the conditions really were. The museum can be found on Clink Street, with the nearest tube station being London Bridge. Again, it's probably one for the dark history fans and not for those with a sensitive nature. If you are visiting here, then I can highly recommend a trip to Borough Market afterwards. I covered this on my last video. Feel free to check that out if you're interested. Number 6. River cruising. The River Thames is one of the most iconic rivers in the world and the second longest in the UK. Flowing through London, it offers an opportunity to explore some of the capital's most iconic landmarks from a very different viewpoint. There are various river cruises and boat trips that you can take advantage of, including hop-on-off services, dining experiences and sightseeing tours with commentaries. As I mentioned before, we did take advantage of a ghost walk that incorporated a 20-minute river cruise at the end, and that was a really good way of doing it if you don't have a lot of time. Personally, it's always been a dream of mine to do the river cruise on New Year's Eve. Each year, if you watch the fireworks in London on the TV, you can see the many boats bobbing about on the water, and I imagine it's a fantastic setting to celebrate the new year. Maybe one day. Have you ever done this? Let me know in the comments if it was worth it. So we're halfway through now. Thank you for keeping up. If you've got this far, please can I ask that you give the video a like. It's completely free and it means that YouTube will show it to more people, and that massively helps me to grow the channel. Thank you so much. Number 5, the Charterhouse. Another one for the history fans, the Charterhouse is located in West Smithfield, with its nearest tube station being Barbican and Farringdon. It's an incredible place with some fantastic stories to tell, and we're very lucky because it only decided to open its doors to visitors in 2016. In order to visit all the areas available to the public, you will need to book a guided tour, and that's because the Charter House is still home to a community of brothers. They benefit from the charity established by Thomas Sutton early in the 17th century. The history on this one is vast, but I'll break it down into easier pieces, and if you want to learn any more, then please visit my other video, which was called Historic London, Burnings, Books and Bodies. I've gone into a lot more detail on that one. So the Charter House began when they ran out of space during the Black Death, and a plague pit was created on the site. After the plague, a religious site was formed, and it was to be formed as a Carthusian monastery. Then Henry VIII came, he dissolved the monasteries, killed some of the monks, and then it therefore became a Tudor palace. And then eventually it was taken over by a charitable man named Thomas Sutton, who I mentioned a minute ago, and he turned it into an almshouse to take care of those that were deserving. And this is what it remains today. If you're interested in history, then again, it's a good choice. Movie fans may also appreciate that some amazing productions have been shot here, including Downton Abbey, Mr. Selfridge, Poirot, Horrible Histories, and Call the Midwife. Do you recognise it from any of those? Let me know. If you are coming, then you can book your tickets online, and nearby, if you're in the area, you can find the William Wallace execution site. Again, I did another little video on this. You should be able to find that somewhere on the channel. Number 4, the Charles Dickens Museum. Of the various London homes Charles Dickens occupied during his literary career, only one house remains today, and that is 48 Doherty Street. It was the author's first house, and he spent 3 years here with his family, during which he finished the Pickwick Papers. He wrote Oliver Twist and Nicholas Nickleby. Today the house is a museum, and it showcases a number of artefacts and personal possessions of the family. Because it's in an old house, it's spread over a number of floors and laid out in a way you'd expect a family home to be in those days for a rising author. Starting at the entrance hall, you can walk through room by room, gathering a unique insight into the life of Charles Dickens and his family. I'd personally recommend getting the guidebook, as this explains in great detail everything that you're looking at. Or I do believe there was an audio tour, but I was using my phone to make this video footage for you guys, so I couldn't take advantage of that. But you probably find that really interesting. For anybody that is interested in Dickens or history, it's a really good one to visit, and the nearest tube is Russell Square. Because of its location, it would be good to tie this in with a trip to the British Museum, which I covered in my last video about the free attractions. So if you're interested in that, feel free to head over there. If it is a nice day, then please do pay a cafe a visit and sit in the garden. It's a real haven and a perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of London streets. They also did really nice cake. What's your favourite Dickens story? Mine, I'm going to say, is probably A Christmas Carol. Number 3, see a show. There are around 240 theatres in London, so it's no surprise that each day people flock to the capital to catch sight of one of the fabulous musicals or shows taking place. The West End in particular is affectionately known as Theatreland, and you will be spoilt for choice with the amount of options available. Again, I've done a video on this if you're interested, which shows points of interest and places to eat. You can find it on the channel homepage. Watching a show in London is definitely one of my favourite things to do, and Agatha Christie fans may be interested to know that the Mousetrap mystery, whodunit, is now the longest running West End show, having played in London since the 25th of November 1952. Each show varies in price dramatically, and you can usually find the best price by shopping about online. If you need any tips on budget travel, do come and join me at the Wanderlust Way Facebook page, where I occasionally share money-saving offers and ideas which I've found when researching for my own travel plans. Number 2, Madame Tussauds. The famous House of Wax, Madame Tussauds is iconically one of London's top attractions, and if you can see past the crowds of tourists inside, then you'll be able to understand why. Opened originally in 1835, Marie Tussaud and her collection of wax figures was a huge success. Back then, the lineup included a range of notable figures and the infamous Chamber of Horrors. During the French Revolution, Marie had been imprisoned and had been employed to make death masks and whole body casts of the Revolution's most famous victims, including Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette. Whilst Tussaud was not the first person to invent the death mask, she was the first to commercialise it, and these effigies, alongside newly created figures of murderers and criminals, formed her Chamber of Horrors attraction. During the Victorian times, there was quite a dark interest in the macabre, and a huge interest in true crime was on the rise. Because of this, the Chamber of Horrors was a huge success. It is said that Marie would often purchase entire contents of murder scenes, and criminals waiting on execution were even known to donate their clothing for their new wax models to wear. The Chamber of Horrors is still here, with some new additions of course, but in today's society it seems the celebrity icons are the ones pulling in the crowds. There's a phrase that you're not famous until a waxwork of you appears in Madame Tussauds, and so you can expect to meet the creme de la creme of celebrity land here, with figures including Samuel Jackson, Leonardo DiCaprio, Beyoncé, and even my favourite, E.T. And if that isn't enough excitement, your ticket price also includes a nostalgic taxi ride through 400 years of London's history, and a 4D Marvel superheroes movie experience. In all honesty, I wasn't expecting to enjoy this. I'm not sure why, but I just wasn't. And I couldn't be more surprised. It was so good, which is why it's made it on the list, and so high up on the list at that. Who would you most like to see at Madame Tussauds? Who's your favourite celebrity? Let me know in the comments. And so now we get to our number one top spot of my all-time favourite historical paid-for attractions in all of London, and that is, drumroll please, yes, it's the Tower of London. It's no surprise that for a true history fan, the Tower of London made the list, and so here it is as my favourite attraction. Built by William the Conqueror as his London fortress in the 1070s, it's still a formidable site and an iconic part of the city's history. Today it is a World Heritage Site and houses the crown jewels and an extensive collection of armoury. It is here that many brutal executions took place, especially during the reign of King Henry VIII, and visitors can see the green in which Anne Boleyn was executed. Many years ago there was even a zoo here, but today it's just the ravens that remain. Cared for by a designated guardian known as the Raven Master, the legend tells that the tower must always maintain at least 6 ravens within its walls to prevent the catastrophic fall of the kingdom. You should be able to see them if you visit, and if you do, please count them and make sure there's at least 6, otherwise we all need to worry. The Tower of London is also said to be one of the most haunted sites in London, and with such a bloody and brutal history, that's no surprise. One of the saddest stories here is that of the princes of the Tower, who were thought to have been murdered on the orders of their uncle, Richard III. The 2 young boys went missing after staying at the Tower under their uncle's guard in 1483. They were never seen again. In 1674, however, 2 skeletons were discovered during renovation work which were believed to be 12-year-old Edward and 9-year-old Richard, increasing the theory that their uncle had removed them in order to gain the throne for himself. It became one of the biggest mysteries in British history and one of the many fascinating stories to come from the Tower of London. The 2 princes are said to haunt the White Tower even to this day. I think the Tower of London has something to offer all ages, and if you are going, then I'd recommend joining the Yeoman or Beefeater tour. They're not usually any additional cost on top of your admission ticket, and it is the only way to get admission into the church in the Tower, which is where the headless bodies of Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard and Lady Jane Grey are resting, so you really don't want to miss that. If you're coming here, then the nearest tube is Tower Hill, or you could come by the river cruise that we mentioned earlier, and this will give you a better look at Traitor's Gate, the medieval prison entrance to the tower. That's it. Thank you to everybody for watching. I hope it's been helpful. If you do need any tips or tricks, remember I have visited all of these attractions and I've visited them quite recently. So just drop me a message in the comments and I'll try my best to help you. All right, have an amazing time, guys, whatever you're doing today. Take care. Bye.